Hello, this is Dr. Akindo Tumerino from JARS Education Institute. Today we want to talk about suicide. According to the CDC, suicide is part of a broader class of behavior called self-directed violence. So self-directed violence refers to behaviors that is directed to oneself, that deliberately wants to cause or causes injury or the potential for injury. So self-directed violence may be suicidal or non-suicidal in nature. Suicide is a death that is caused by self-directed injurious behavior with an intent to die. But you could have attempts that don't result into suicide. So suicide attempt is when the non-fatal, self-directed, potentially injurious behavior, but the intent is still to die as a result of that behavior. Suicide is associated with so many risks and protective factors, which I'm going to share with you today. Suicide is a negative coping mechanism. People who attempt suicide are trying to relieve themselves of the pain that they're in, the emotional, psychological pain that they're in. But suicide, just like any other thing, doesn't have any one single determining cause. So there's not causality. We can't say, okay, this caused that. No. In fact, suicide occurs as a result of several multiple myriad factors: biological, psychological, emotional, interpersonal, spiritual, the society that we live in, the environment. All of this can interact at the same time or over time. So what are some of these risk factors? So when you say somebody killed themselves and you said, oh, it's because they lost their job or it's because they did this, it's usually not that clean. It's usually not one factor. It's usually not necessarily one thing. It's usually a cumulative event. So risk factors, though, that you should be aware of, that we all should be aware of, on the individual level, you have to be aware of a history of depression and other mental illnesses. If the person has struggled with mental illness, they have a risk factor. The problem in parts of the world where we don't really pay attention to mental illness, we have no diagnosis, we don't have any care around that, you might not know that somebody has a history of mental illness. So the history of depression or any other form of mental illnesses, hopelessness. Hope is vital to our continuation as human beings. When there is no hope, a lack of hope is almost fatal. Hopelessness is one. Substance abuse, any type of addictions. Some health conditions, when you are so ill, terminal ones, debilitating ones. Previous suicide attempts. If there's any type of victimization that's going on. And sometimes there's genetic and biological markers or determinants that keeps you in the risk zone. So if you check any of this, you are on that risk zone. How about relational levels? If you are engaged in high conflict or violent relationship, you could be at risk for suicidality. when you high conflicted, violent relationships, if you have a deep sense of aloneness, of isolation, you don't have any type of social support. If you have a family history of suicide, if there's major financial and work stress, it puts you at that risk factor. On the community level, if there is not adequate community connectiveness, we are communal beings. Our default is to be with others. So if there's no connection, you don't have any sense of community. You don't belong in particular spaces. If there's barriers to health care, so there's no place to go when you are ill, or no place to go for mental health assistance. You don't have access to medication. This puts you at risk. On a societal level, if we do not provide the protective, if we don't provide the means for people to be able to care for themselves, if there is lethal means, guns all around us, these group societal levels that we need to think about. If people are unsafe, if people do not have a ways of living their life, if there's stigma associated with mental illness, all of this will put people at risk. You know, it's also important to know that when people are depressed, they have major depression, they're suffering from depression, suicidal thoughts are two peas in a pod. They're two peas in a pod. Suicidal ideation and depression go hand in hand. It's the attempt that we don't want to happen. We don't want people to actually try to take their lives. But these risk factors that I've talked about, they're things that we know we can alleviate as a community. As an individual, reduce your risk. There's a whole principle of beneficence, that you increase benefits and reduce risk factors. So what are some of these benefits? What are some of these protective factors? So developing effective, good coping skills, mastering how to solve problems, being part of a functional community. If you see something, say something. Checking on each other. Being part of a strong and supportive, intimate relationship works. Being part of having a group of friends that you can talk to. Having a good family support. How connected are you to other things that are going on outside of yourself? Social institutions. These are all protective factors. Taking care of yourself, learning how to manage your emotions. And if you don't know how, contact us, we'll teach you. Making sure that you're reducing access as a community, access to lethal means in which people can kill themselves. Ensuring that people are economically viable. But on personal levels, taking a walk outside, making sure that you are keeping your life simple, prioritize. And when things happen, never lose hope. Because no matter how dark it is, if there's life, there is hope. That tomorrow can be better. If you're struggling today, click on the link below. Or up, I don't know where it is. But click on that link and we will get you the help, all the training that you need. And for those who have loved ones, we'll be talking about grief and how to go through that process. I send you love. I send you comfort. It's all we can do. But take your time and go through this time of pain. There's no time for grief. Take as long as you need. Thank you. I'll see you next time.